myself, John Hume, Ivan Cooper, went up and we talked peace, the march organisers the night before. And we talked about how we would stop what was thought to be inevitable trouble the next day. It was decided that we in the Bogside would put people at exit points from the Bogside to try and stop trouble.
I was 16, it was my first Apprentice Boys Parade. I remember distinctly coming through the Waterloo Square area, which again led on to the Bogside. And I could see the police lines and the crowds of nationalists behind. I wasn't fearful up to that point, but then when the Stones came over, I began as a 16-year-old to get a bit fearful, to think, what was this all about? But up to that point, I wasn't concerned that there could be an outbreak of significant trouble, let alone, the 2 or 3 days that followed. No, I wasn't.
The police attacked the crowd and the crowd ran into the Bogside. Hundreds of people. And then hundreds of ordinary unionist people ran into the Bogside. That really was the origins of the Battle of the Bogside.
First civil rights march in Derry was a protest against unemployment. And I organised it, listen to this, in 1960. The Bogside was the most densely populated area in the whole of Europe for its size. 2/3 of the population of this town were nationalists, could only elect 8 councillors. 1/3 of the population, being unionists, could vote 12.
And you're all living in harmony and peace and quiet here. Please God, you will keep it that way.
All of my experience suggests to me there is no way where we're going to do anything politically or by appeals or sentiments to get the unionists to break that monolithic hold they had on the political situation. It wasn't going to happen unless people came on the streets and confronted them.
I'll never forget that day on the 12th of August, walking past it, the 2 kids, one in a pram and one hanging on to the handle, and looking and seeing these men. They were like rag dolls, but it was RUC and it was the B Specials, and they were lying there. They probably had come out of the Bogside and they were just totally exhausted, shattered, but we really didn't know what was going on in there because we didn't go in there. Oh my goodness, I just thought then it was the end of the world.
I do remember being over at a Presbyterian church, the rear of which was onto the Bogside, and there were a lot of petrol bombs being thrown at the police, and it appeared to us as Protestants that the church was under attack. And I remember the group of nationalists got this huge industrial type of tyre and must have doused it with petrol, and that's something, and set it aflame and rolled it down into the crowd.
The amazing thing about the Battle of the Bogside is the unity of the people in the Bogside. There was no criminal behaviour, there was no tension among the people. Every single one in the Bogside was unified against the police. And everybody rioted, of course, everybody. It was an obligation, you had to riot. So you did your shift at the rioting down there, and then you went about some other business. And it was very, very, very impressive.
And I think it was 2 days into it, we went to Castle Rock. It's a small beach on the Antrim coast. But as we came back up home from the beach, we could see the sky red with the buildings burning. And I remember at that time, that's the one thing that sticks in my head yet, was the absolute fear of what was the future going to give for us. Is our city going to be burnt to the ground?
The battle went on 24 hours a day. The police became totally and completely exhausted. There was no alternative for the British government but to send British troops onto the streets.
Now, at that time of the Battle of the Bogside, there was a house where people went to learn how to shoot guns and learn about explosives. Now, all that meant to me at that time was the re-emergence of the IRA.
Have you ever had any friends at all on the Protestant side?
Oh yes, we're friends on the Protestant side. Weren't friends last night.
No friends last night, they weren't. They were just out to butcher us last night.
Who set these houses on fire then?
The Catholics themselves.
They set their own houses on fire?
Yeah, getting rid of our petrol bombs. So they weren't caught with them in their hands. Scuttling back to their holes like rats.
I say tell them to get help here before we're murdered. Murdered for us 7 kids, and I don't want my kids murdered.
Get the military, get somebody in to help us.
That night, August the 14th, but there was a major riot going on exactly where we're standing at the moment. If you look over here to the sides, the police had their whippets, their mobile armoured cars stationed in the side streets. The whippet armoured cars had been used to break up the crowd and were now opening fire, had moved into the Divis Flats complex, and it was shots from those armoured cars that killed young Patrick Rooney and Hugh McCabe. And the guys on the top of the flats had crates of bottles of petrol. They weren't proper petrol bombs, they didn't light them. But what they would do is, in advance of a police baton charge, they would drop the crate of bottles down onto the road, smash it to create a pool of petrol, and then as the police ran up, the plan presumably was to light that and create a wall of flame to incinerate them. So I watched that kind of dance going on between the baton charges, the whippets from the side streets, and the petrol bombs from the roof. I watched that for about an hour.
A small number of IRA men were on the roof here, and they saved this side of the Falls Road from being burnt down, including St Peter's Pro Cathedral behind us here. And they fought the RUC in gun battles right throughout the night, and if you look carefully you'll see large bullet marks in the wall from the RUC heavy submachine guns.
On the following day, I came up here with my sister because my father managed 2 bars on these corners on the Crumlin Road. And what we found in the pub was a very dark atmosphere. Customers that we knew on a very friendly basis before were now not so friendly. My brother Brian closed the bar, and that night the 2 bars were burnt to the ground. I think you know then, or you feel very deeply, that the earth has moved under you and is going to be different, not just for a short time, but forever afterwards.
It screamed to me that here were nationalists. Not only were they saying we hadn't got rights, but they were pointing to me and saying, and you do. And I resented that because I didn't. I was in exactly the same boat as them. The world listened to them, but didn't listen to me.
If we had a thought more about the lives of Protestant working class people, as well as thinking about the way nationalist people were treated very badly, I think that might have been very important.
When you take on a rotten, corrupt, immovable system, there is going to be violence.
Thousands and thousands of people murdered, killed, and many more injured. I mean, what for? You know, some say it was about United Ireland. Here we're still sitting in 2019, there ain't no United Ireland, nor can I foresee one in the future.
A United Ireland, an armed struggle, was fantasy to us back then. And it was only as things deteriorated that's how the conflict broke out. And in that armed struggle itself, nobody could have believed that it would have gone on for 25, 30 years.
Looking back and seeing what it did to the families and the community, I have to question myself whether I believe that violence is a good method of reform, you know.
I was living a different kind of life. I had a Protestant girlfriend, you know. I was living my own revolution. It was the ordinary sexual revolution of the 60s, you know. I had my own priorities, you know. And what I felt was destroyed in August 69 was the prospect of me living that normal life.
So you will carry on?
I will carry on, yes, to the end. And I hope the end is the end of unionism. Thank you.